Hi, everybody. We're going to get started, and hopefully this will leave, we have about 45 minutes, and we're hoping to leave a decent amount of time for question and conversation. So my name is Ann Michael, and I work with Delta Think, and we recently worked with the International Association for the Study of Pain. Jill will introduce herself in a second. And basically what we're going to go through today is our project to come up with a digital content strategy for them, and basically go through customer insight and some aspects of their strategic plan, digital vision, some of the supporting objectives we put together, and how we translated that into a roadmap. We're going to kind of both be up here because we kind of go back and forth fast.
You want this? Sure. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Jill Treby, and I am the Director of Membership and Marketing at IASP. Before working there, I also held positions in publications, marketing, and membership at the American Chemical Society and the American Geophysical Union. So before we jump into our project, I wanted to tell you a little bit about IASP. Everyone's always fascinated. Pain, right? I have pain. I can be your first member, right? That's what I hear a lot. But what you should know is that we are a community of members who are dedicated really to the study of pain as its own discipline and who really specialize in pain. So we are about half of our members. We have about 7,300 members, and about half are clinicians who are working hands-on with patients in the treatment and management of pain. About 20% are basic scientists who are studying the mechanisms of pain, and then another 20 to 25% are clinical researchers who are sort of bridging both gaps. We were founded by John Bonica in 1973, and I put this image up there because he has a really interesting story. He was a wrestler. So he wrestled like in circuses and vaudeville to put himself through medical school, and he had these two really separate lives. So you'll see, this is him in his youth, and then this is him later. But it was his experiences with pain from his wrestling, and then also when his wife was giving birth to their first child, that really inspired him. So he is really credited with establishing pain as a discipline and a specialty separate from any causes of pain, really. So just treating pain as itself. So IASP is a truly global and international organization, and we were founded that way. So when the discipline was very small back in the 70s, and we brought people together globally. So we are an international organization with direct members, but we also have 94 national chapters, and those are pain societies in their own rights in their countries. So we truly are representative all around the world, and that's part of our challenge, is delivering value and serving members. A little bit more about us. We have a World Congress of Pain. Is that the best name of a meeting ever? And it's every other year, which is a real challenge in terms of convening members again and bringing them together. So we were in Yokohama in 2016. We happened to be in Boston in 2018, but that's the first time that we're back in North America since 2010, and the first time in the United States since 2002. So members, if they are attending all of our meetings, which is a very small percentage, are actually able to go around the world. So we were in Yokohama, we were in Buenos Aires, we were in Milan. I mean, these are wonderful places, but difficult to get to sometimes for everyone. But at most, they're meeting with each other every other year. One of our initiatives is the Global Year Against Pain, and this is something that we work with our chapters on. So every year has a different theme. 2017 happens to be the Global Year Against Pain After Surgery. So we provide resources and materials and a lot of our chapters, their meetings focus on this theme. And that's one of the ways that part of the content that we serve up. And then finally, we published 2 journals with Wolters Kluwer, Pain, and our latest open access journal, Pain Reports. And this really serves the basic science element of our membership more so than the clinicians.
So kind of going into basics, why think about strategy at all? So really the word for this presentation, the word for that was kind of guiding us with ISP is alignment. And that's why you work with strategy. You need to make informed decisions. You want to get people moving in the same general direction. You want people to have some guidance, but not prescriptive guidance. When they're faced with choices about they could do A or B or C, which one are they going to do? So really strategy is setting the context for what the organization values and what it does. Digital content strategy, and so it's kind of funny to me that you can hear people talk about digital strategy, about content strategy, about digital content strategy, about there are so many different kinds of strategies your head could spin. And what I should say about this entire presentation is we really worked with AISP to define what they needed and then to give it the labels that they could use that would work for them. So what we looked at was we said, well, there's a digital strategy. So let's look at all of our audiences, all of our interactions. What are they trying to do with us and how effectively are they able to do it? Then there's digital content strategy, which now let's focus in on our content and see where does it fit into that digital strategy and where does it also have purposes that might be beyond that digital strategy and how does that fit together? And so the whole idea, as it says here, and I'm not going to read the slides because you can do that, is really clarifying intentions. What do we want to do with content? Where, when, how, and for whom? So by understanding digital opportunities, we can maximize the benefit and value of content, where we use it and how we use it. And we can enable a bunch of different things. Personalization, customization. Jill talks about a diverse audience across the world that have different needs. We can enable new products, new portfolios, collections. We can use our content in different ways. We gain an understanding of how we need to create our content in order to adapt to the channels and the devices that we're faced with now, and potentially even the ones that we haven't been faced with yet, how to build in flexibility to be able to accommodate them a little bit more readily. And of course, the underlying and probably one of the most important things is thinking about what are some of the unmet needs. Where are the places we can help our users, members, customers, however you would like to refer to them, and how do we also sustain that? So can we create revenue streams? Which is an interesting question when dealing with a lot of mission organizations, because mission-driven organizations, they kind of balance revenue and mission differently. Some might take a little more up on mission, some might take a little bit up more on revenue, so you have to be flexible. And then other reasons why to develop a strategy is to be faster, to use your resources more appropriately, to ensure quality and consistency, so you're doing things the same way. And again, the whole idea about delivery.
So what were ISP's objectives going into this project? I joined the organization about a year ago, and we also had a new executive director. So together we said, how are we going to serve our global organization, a global pain community, and do it and deliver the resources and the information that meets this really diverse group we have. So we have, again, clinicians, basic scientists, clinical researchers. We also have people with varying specialties. We have anesthesiologists, we have neuroscientists, we have psychologists, we have physical therapists, we have nurses. So how to deliver value to this really diverse group? It's going to have to be digital. And what we have right now doesn't support that, quite frankly. So this is how we're going to move forward. Again, we're going to drive member value because we're going to enable them to connect with each other and connect with our organization more than once every other year, right? Even if they're coming to the meeting. And we're going to allow them to get the tools that they need for what they are working on. A physical therapist has a very different need for information and a need to connect than a basic scientist does. And we also, of course, want to drive participation and engagement. So again, how can we deliver value, but also ways to interact with our organization? So as I mentioned, members can directly belong to ISP, but they also belong to their chapters. And while we have about 7,000 members, the membership of the chapters worldwide is upward of 60,000. So there's definitely an opportunity there. And how can ISP invest wisely going forward? And recognize revenue streams and opportunities that exist. So part of this process also enabled us to do a bit of a gap analysis about how we could better serve our groups across the board.
So I have a confession to make. Jill and I have done this presentation once before, and at this point, her machine rebooted, and we were left with literally about 10 minutes it took, Windows, to reboot. So we feel as though we're ahead of the game now.
We're ahead of the game.
So the point of this visual is just that there are lots of different ways to approach strategy, and they're valid ways. They are different directions, different paths. And so again, to stress, for ISP, we defined a path and decided which of the roads we would like to take. Come on. Something had to go wrong. But I know I did. I spoke too soon. So, but the point is, at the basic core of any road we would take, we had the realization that, obviously, when you're thinking about strategy, when you're thinking about what you want to do, you really need to think of the intersection of user needs and your strategic objectives. So the point is that you could uncover a world of user needs, but some of those enhance and progress your strategy. Some do not. Some of them may cause you to change your strategy. That you might discover a need that you say, wow, we really are well suited at doing that, so we should append or revise our strategy. But at the end of the day, you're working on what's in the middle there. And if you're not, then you're not optimizing what you're doing. I think this is you, my dear.
So how did we get started? As I mentioned, I was new to the organization and we had new executive leadership. And there had been a large transition in the organization overall. There was very little institutional knowledge. They had moved from Seattle to Washington, D.C., and there was really very little staff that had more than 18 months tenure there. So we said, first, we need to understand what we're dealing with. We need to own this data. There was some existing market research, but it wasn't anything that anyone currently there had commissioned or designed or participated in. So we needed to really establish a foundation of knowledge for ourselves, overall for the organization, and especially looking for this project. We designed this research with what we wanted to know. So we did really two things. We had a large-scale survey of members, of former members, of people in the pain community whose information we had, of lapsed members. We went out to everybody, and we found out as much as we could about what they value, how that would, what we could do for them, the gaps, what they were struggling with. What they thought ISP did well, what they didn't, what language they liked to receive information in. We really went very broad with that information. And then we did some in-depth interviews with some targeted groups to probe on the findings. So, for example, one of the findings that came was when we asked, what was your primary reason for joining ISP? And how can we start using that term a little more often, since apparently it's what's important to them. But so we were able to then use this, the independent that helped when we were formulating our digital strategy and moving forward. So what type of digital products would people value? What language was preferred? So for example, I said we're an international organization, and the work that we do is primarily in English. Our journals are in English, our meetings are in English, but we do translate materials. Often our chapters do that, and we often have simultaneous translation at some of our meetings for some of the plenary sessions. So again, in planning how we were going to approach this with our resources, would it be something that would be important to deliver content in different languages? We found out actually, no, they primarily like to work in English, so that's good to know. And then after we took the research from the community. What did we know from our members? We said, so what what about IASP? How do we marry the information we learned and what our strategic goals are? And so I'm not going to read them to you, but you can see that a strong digital strategy is going to support them all, obviously, especially number 2 about being a distribution hub. And we took the intersection of that information to move forward and develop our digital vision.
So what we're going to focus on for the rest of the presentation are 3 of the several different deliverables that came out of the engagement with IASP. And they kind of build in a funnel. So the first one is their vision statement, and we'll get into what that is and what that means. Then supporting objectives, which clarify actions that would support the vision statement. And then finally, and you're going to sense a big gap here, because there is a gap. There's a lot more that you can do in like a half-day seminar versus in 45 minutes. But we get into the roadmap of how they would actually execute on that. And so basically, why even bother with a vision statement? So a vision statement is, where do you want to be? Where is your organization going? How do you plan to serve members? And the vision statement, one you might observe, is potentially broader than simply digital vision statement. It really is encompassing a lot of what the organization does. And ISP did have a vision statement, and as it turned out, they started to adapt what we were doing to more and more different parts of the organization, because we set to kind of state what that direction is. And as you can see here too, again, I'm not going to read this, but there's 3 important attributes to think of. One is there's an aspirational element. So we would get in workshops and conversations, we'd start to come out with, potential drafts of what the vision statement would be, and sometimes folks would be like, oh, but we don't do that, and that's good. If it's something, though, that you want to be doing in 3 to 5 years, then it should be in that vision statement. It should be pushing you forward. The other thing is, though, it has to be consistent with your brand. It has to be consistent with who you are and what you say you are to your members and your customers. And if it isn't, and if it's still something that you feel is important, you may want to be reevaluating your branding, and which is a completely different project and initiative. But given that your brand does roughly reflect who you are and who you want to be, it should be consistent. And finally, it needs to be created based on market insight, based on your strategy and your direction and who you are, with input from users, staff, and also with member leaders. So part of this is not just the creation process, it's the beginning of the change management process, especially if you're moving from, if you're slightly altering where you believe your direction has been in the past. So part of it, it's important to get people in governance involved. It's important to get those high-profile members involved, because they're going to help you later.
So here it is. This is our digital vision. And I'm not going to read it to you, but what I do want to point out is that within it are core concepts about our organization. So it's our commitment to the developing world. It is the full multidisciplinary care team. It is the clinical, the practice, the research. It is convening the community. So rather than create the statement and then pick out the key points, we created it the other way. As Ann said, we had a big workshop where we took our research, we took our goals, and we pulled everything together to come up with this statement, and it reflects the core concepts about our organization and about where we want to be.
So neither one of us likes to stand up here and just talk all the time. And we've done, the last time, we did this once before, we were kind of walking around like Phil Donahue style, but they told us we had to stand here. So it's kind of a little silly. But so supporting objectives, what's the point of supporting objectives? So again, you can read what's up there, but basically the whole idea of supporting objectives is to take that vision and start to kind of carve out a little bit of how you're going to get there, but more from a strategic perspective than from a prescriptive perspective. So the idea of objectives is not to handcuff people, but it's to recognize the fact that different people in the organization have different roles, responsibilities, and quite frankly, different demands that are placed on them because of what they do and how they do it. So you want to give guidance and a framework, but you don't want to be so prescriptive that you're telling them exactly how to do their job, oftentimes without the detailed knowledge they have about doing their job.
So we have 7. So the first slide represents the first three that are up here. The first one is about increasing our engagement and our connection with our special interest groups. We have 20 special interest groups, and they range from pain in childhood to pain of war and torture to neuropathic pain to ethical and legal issues in pain. So they're really, again, very broad. But they do a lot of work, and they get together, and they're very active, and they are one of the ways that members are able to find value in the organization and interact with people who are interested in the same topics that they are. So by forging a closer connection with them, we are then able to use and showcase the content that they develop and make them more visible, which they appreciate, and really just enhance the connection overall. And the second objective about facilitating the multidisciplinary involvement and collaboration to advance, it's really about the discipline of pain. So this would be one that I would say would be specific to IASP. So when working on digital strategy and content strategy, there are some best practices, right? There are some common elements across the board. And this is one that I would think you wouldn't necessarily find in another person's or another organization's strategy, because this is really about what makes IASP unique and really serving the specific community that we are. And these first two are really about serving our members and our community and looking outward. The third one is about partnering effectively to address pain. So no one organization can address everything. There are many allied organizations in our space. And this is an objective to help us partner with them and make sure that we are, again, being the hub of information and convening and making sure that the best information out there is available to our community. 4 and 5 are about how IASP really has really specific and leading authoritative information. So we have an authoritative taxonomy for pain, which is, again, a really specific community, and we are the originators of it. So by putting this information out there, we enable everyone to use the same language, and we enable the community to really come together. Number 5 is about how we curate and produce specific research and clinical translation. And then 6 and 7 are more cultural and organizational practices that we are going to adopt about internally a culture of experimentation and trying things and not being afraid to try new things and then try new things. And then we're also not going to reinvent the wheel. So we're not software developers. We're not, we're gonna use the best of what's out there to enhance our product. And then we adopted, in addition to our digital strategy, we have content strategy objectives. And those relate to how we create, manage, store, and deliver the content in our wonderful new digital platform and presence. So number 1, about adopting a data-driven approach. So we started our project with data, and we're going to continue to do that. So we're going to continue to gather more information and use formal research, informal research to feed and enhance our product. It's not going to end. We always say the web is never done, right? Number 2, we have a lot of moving parts in this project, and we're going to manage them in a portfolio approach. So we have technology, we have use cases, we have all kinds of elements that content to ensure alignment with our business, and we're going to continue to check that. We're going to work with them together to make sure that we're all integrated and in alignment. We're going to identify and optimize channels to make sure that we're delivering everything as effectively as possible and that the users are having the best possible experience. And we're going to apply program management to everything, so again, to make sure everything works in concert and there's not an emphasis on one section more over another, so that there's a balanced and consistent approach to delivering this information. And then finally, we're just going to continue. We're always going to get better. That's what number 5 is all about.
And just to add on to this, so a lot of the things that are here on this particular slide are common sense. You would say people should do this, but they don't. So and it's funny, oftentimes you do find that in consulting that a lot of times the value that you bring is kind of laying out some of these things that people know they should do that they don't do, but then helping them put the mechanisms in place to do them and to keep them front of mind. And I think that with ISP, that's no exception. So there were, as I mentioned, there was a lot of stuff that happened between objectives and the act of creating a roadmap, a lot of which is in here, and we can talk about that, and we can certainly talk about that when we have questions. But the whole idea was, now that we have these principles, now that we have these visions, what does this actually mean? So there was a detailed mapping to specific projects, to specific content sets, things of that nature that we're kind of not going through here. But we did want, the point of this whole exercise was creating alignment. And so within the strategic framework, we wanted to be able to use this to evaluate desirability of the current and future activities that ISP would engage in. Basically, what this is saying is we created a roadmap, and Jill will go through it in a second, that has two layers. There is a strategic element to the roadmap, projects within that strategic element, and you'll see the roadmap in a second, and then tactical elements. And the ones that were at the strategy level, the first and foremost thing was developing a portfolio of use cases. So the idea is that we're going to have use cases that define the most critical, high priority things that users, members are doing with us in this digital world. And when we are faced with opportunities, we are going to evaluate them against those use cases. And we're going to say, okay, publishing wants to do X. Which use case does it support? How well does it support it? What is it, and that's part of the evaluation of whether or not you're going to do it. And the other part of that is maybe it doesn't support any of them, but everybody sits around and says, wow, this is really important. And perhaps we need to realign our use cases and our priorities. So we're talking about an ever-evolving, iterative environment where there are a series of use cases that they evaluate everything against, but they understand that the value and importance of those use cases will vary over time, and new things will come in, new things will come out. And you'll see when Jill goes through the roadmap that there are portfolios of other things too, including technology, including content, and all of these portfolios align. But the core one, the real important one that starts it all, is the use cases.
I know, here it is. So this is my beautiful roadmap. And out of the, the hundreds of pages of work product that this project has produced, this is the one I come back to, and this is the one that's on my wall all the time. And I know you can't read the detail in it, but the top part, the dark green, that is those are the strategic components. It's as Ann said, the use cases, the content portfolio, the technology portfolio, the data portfolio, and the overall project portfolio. That what I think of those are the elements that we at IASP really need to be involved with and direct. So if we had somebody else make use cases for us, they're going to reflect, they need our input, right? So
And your ownership.
And our ownership. It needs to really reflect who we are as an organization and the community that we serve. So this is where, when I think about this whole intensive 18-month project, this is where we spend our time. And then these are the supporting projects where we're going to get some help to really move forward. And so these are centralizing our content, really working on our taxonomy. There's a lot in here about technology that we need to work on. There's elements about community and collaboration in here. But what I love about this is that it enables me to say, I have my vision, I have my strategic objectives, and I have my strategic management components, and that is where I focus, and that's where my team focuses. And when we start to really implement everything, I know these are the types of support we're going to need to move forward, the tactical implementation.
So, key takeaways, and again, we can get into this a little bit more the whole idea is that IASP realized that delivering member value and optimizing that delivery really was going to be dependent on having a clear vision and strategy for what it was they were delivering, and embracing the idea that it's iterative. So you don't build a digital strategy of supporting objectives, all of these things, and put them down and say, I'm done. You're never done. Because what you really have created is your baseline, and you're going to keep iterating over that. You're going to keep getting new information. If you truly are being data-driven, if you truly are being responsive to your users, that's what's going to happen. Well, everyone owns the organizational content strategy or digital content strategy. Somebody has to drive this. There has to be a voice in the organization that is taking it home, that's thinking about it, that's making sure other people are thinking about it, that's proliferating its importance, because if everybody owns it, nobody owns it, and things just kind of putter out. And finally, it's really important to keep getting feedback from key member leaders, from other members, and on every dimension. So not just strategy and objectives. Quite frankly, they may never see those. For many of your members, it's just going to be the products of how you've chosen to fulfill that vision and those strategic objectives. But the idea of continually getting feedback is important, and especially in a global organization, not relying on the same sources for feedback, but kind of spreading out, making sure you're getting different parts of your membership, parts of your governance process, keeping those governance leaders, and in your case, even councils and council leadership who technically are not governance, in the loop and evolving what you're doing so that they feel ownership of it and so that it's the right thing. It's not simply, this is not about IASP sitting in their white tower and saying, do this. IASP isn't in a white tower, they're everywhere, and that's how they have to approach this.
So, as you can tell, I'm ecstatic about this project, and we really just got started. So we finished with the roadmap and everything in March. So now we're working on our use cases. We're really at the very beginning of the implementation, but having this foundation and having gone through this process has really been valuable because it enables us to talk about it. When we talk about it, it's really been helpful talking about it with our leadership because it's not this abstract, big, expensive project. It has really specific components that align with our organizational goals, are based on member research, and are clearly able to, and we're clearly able to then articulate how they are going to advance the organization and our missions and goals. And it's been incredibly successful. Anyone who's ever had to stand up in front of an organization, ask for tons of money, knows that any tool you can have in your arsenal is incredibly useful. And this has been, it's been very well received, I can tell you, in an organization where that is usually a very combative process. So it's been wonderful. And it also, as an organization, because while I was the lead on the project, as we're a small group, we're about 13 staff, everyone was involved, and we're all using the same language. So it's useful because everyone has been in on it and is part of it. And so as a cross-organizational effort, we're really walking the walk. And it has further enabled us to really evaluate our overall technology ecosystem. So it becomes, again, the foundation and the driver for making sure everything works. And that has been incredibly useful too. So again, we're at the beginning. I'd love to come back and talk to you in 18 months when we're done and show my website, which I'm not going to do right now. but it's been really wonderful, and I'm excited to take the next step.
And so at this point, we can definitely take some questions. They did say that this was being recorded, so if you have a question, they want you to use the microphone. Does anyone have a question? Sure.
I was just curious in terms of technology. I mean, that plays a big part in digital content strategy. Are you using your own internal technologies, or are you kind of looking externally for platforms that like store content, manage taxonomies, that sort of thing?
I mean, we really are at the beginning of it. We know that we need a new CMS, so we're really willing to throw out everything we currently have and explore what is the best out there. So that's part of our evaluation process.
And part of this was an inventory too, and kind of a kind of schematic of how things fit together. Sorry, Christine. You have to.
Hi, Christine Lamb from Anyjam Group. I'm wondering if you also built in additional resourcing and staff resources for some of your plans. I may have missed it at the beginning, but it seems like when you have ambitious goals, you'll never get there if you don't think about that. So can you talk a little bit about it? And related, you said everyone's responsible for strategy, but one person needs to have this kind of cross-functional accountability. And can you talk a little bit about that role and also who that person is? Thanks.
Oh, sure, it's me, so I can talk about it intimately. But so what we've done is we did hire a digital marketing manager, which was a role that didn't exist before. And the vision with that role was somebody to, I will say when we hired the person, we knew it was important that that person would be able to not only really help implement the day-to-day, update the website, post social media, that type of thing, but really be part of the management and strategic elements of the web presence and the digital presence going forward. And so that's been great. And one of the tools that we have found as a cross-functional that has been incredibly useful in our organization is we've established a digital marketing team. And so someone from the publications team, from the meetings team, from the membership team, and our digital marketing manager leads this, meet weekly, and we have a digital editorial calendar that lists all of our channels. So our website, our social media, our every email, everything that we are using to communicate about our content. And they go through it. So they populate it, and the idea is that it's populated continuously, but then at the meetings it is reviewed, and helps everyone keep in alignment and understand what's going on across the organization. I've always found that in an organization, as much as you might want to know about what's going on across, you're really focused on the part that you work on. So this, I think, has really enhanced our organization in general in terms of being just aware of what goes on, and it helps tie into bigger groups. So, for example, there was an International Women's Day, and we happen to have had a global year against pain in women or something like that. And so we had a lot of content that we could put out there. So we were able to tie in valuable information that we had to this larger event. And it was effortless because we had scheduled it and we had identified it in advance. So I think that is a tool that's worked well. And then so that was the key resource that we hired. And then we're really looking to partner, I think, to do most of the implementation. I don't see taking on a ton more staff, but we're going to evaluate it as we move forward.
And, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just to add on to that a little bit too. So if you were to dive into that roadmap, every one of those projects has a page that describes what it's about, what it's going to take, who needs to be involved. And what'll happen is as they proceed through, they may actually identify areas, but they're just, other than some of the key areas that Jill's already talked about, they haven't gotten that far yet.
Oh, and then just as a follow-up to that, the strategic elements that were in the dark green at the top, we, as a leadership team, we do discuss. So whether or not one or many of us are involved in a specific project, that is how we talk about this project in general with the leadership team, so everyone is involved. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Scott Henry from ASM International. I think a little bit you touched on how the roadmap kind of has influenced your processes and things like that. How much detail does it go into in terms of like technology, systems, that sort of thing?
It goes into a fair bit of detail. So as Anne mentioned, each project has the amount of hours and type of expertise needed. And it also has the roadmap also has recommendations. So for example, I mentioned we're going to ditch our CMS, right? So we're looking for new ones. So it has, and there were, for example, there were recommendations of more user-friendly CMS platforms that we could use. We run on an IMIS platform for our AMS. So anything that integrates well with IMIS is going to be useful to us. But I do think that the end product of this project, the strategy part of it, and the final documents is really something that anyone could pick up and then take and lead. So I intend to stay and do that. But if I win the lottery tomorrow and that's not the case, then the organization will be able to move forward with the project.
And also just before, so the roadmap has a structure to it, and the first part of it, a lot of it is assessment of the current environment with details about what's in that environment, what's working well, what isn't working well, and where there are opportunities to align in different places. But the projects themselves are going to select the technology. So that final configuration isn't done yet. Bless you. Anyone else?
Right on time.
4 minutes, you get to go to lunch early. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.